Carl Spajorek, always prepared solutions. Sitting here waiting for my daughter to do a little band thing at school. Is one of those, oh, you're not really invited, Dad. You can't come in for it. But can I come do it? Yeah, that's fine. So here I am sitting in my parking lot. Absolutely not going to make an angry guy yelling into the air from his truck cab video. Not going to do that. I'm not that kind of guy. However, there are some things going on in the world that I felt it might be worthwhile to make a little video about. So to start with, I am by no means a nuclear expert. I'm not a nuclear weapons expert. Never dealt with nuclear weapons when I was in the military, outside of just basic awareness of them, understanding of them. I was an artilleryman. There are atomic artillery pieces. I never fired one. However, that being said, I am a hazmat technician, certified and trained, IFSTA Pro Board certified. So I do have to have an awareness of radiological hazards. And the place I work does have a radiological area where they deal with radiological items that they're trying to take out of service. So I do have some understanding of radiation, and I do a lot of reading on my own to try to educate myself on things. So right now, lots of tension in the world, right? 2022, Russia moves into Ukraine, into areas that they had not had anybody previously operating in, officially. I guess you could say they moved into Ukraine in 2014 when they invaded Crimea, but regardless, tensions really ratcheted up, operations started ratcheting up, and the threat of nuclear apocalypse started entering into the popular discussion more. So people started really getting worried about things that kind of died off a little bit up until recently. It seems like as the current administration is getting ready to move out of office, they are making more and more authorizations for supplied material use that the U.S. has supplied to Ukraine that they were previously very hesitant to allow. And this is really turning up tensions, ratcheting up tensions with Russia on their declared doctrine. Their declared doctrine, to my understanding, is if any nuclear power provides weapons and allows those weapons or materials to be used in a direct strike against Russian homeland, that constitutes a first strike, according to them. They're going to be one off on that. The world's not going to, I believe, agree with them on that one. I believe they know the world's not going to agree with them on that one. It's a posturing thing. They wanted to try to limit what Ukraine could do to fight back. Regardless, the threat's there. We're back to one of the highest threat levels for a nuclear war that we've been at, as far as I'm aware, since I was born. So understanding nuclear war, the nuclear threat, the aspects of radiation, I think could do a lot to help alleviate people, because I believe a nuclear conflict is actually fully survivable by a lot of people. And there's some reasons for that. So first, when it comes to the threat are nuclear warheads, correct? You have the actual heat. You have the overpressure from the detonation. You have residual overpressure from the detonation. There is electromagnetic pulse generated by the detonation, and depending on where it's at, that might be all we get is an electromagnetic pulse. And there's also the radioactive fallout, the radiation from the detonation and the radioactive fallout after the detonation. So to kind of go through these in order here, so you have the initial blast where we'll call it the meat and potatoes of the nuclear explosion occur, right? You have basically atomic processes are occurring. We could do fission, we could do fusion. Either one, doesn't matter, going to generate a huge amount of energy, way more than your chemical explosives are going to be able to produce. That generates a significant amount of heat. We're talking millions of degrees, at least for a short period of time. Most of these devices, to my understanding, are designed for about an air burst. just to the air burst versus ground burst is going to get to that second part, that overpressure, right? That's where most of the destruction is going to occur. So there's some simulators online you can look at that will just Google nuclear blast simulator. It will actually be able to do an overlay of either, I can't remember if it is Google Earth or if it's something like Google Earth, Google Maps, whatever, to where it will place a detonation where you want it to. So you can actually see, based on size of explosion, get a general idea of what the actual blast zone is going to be, where this overpressure, where this residual overpressure, all that. And I might not be using the correct terminology. It's just my remembering of how it is. But that actual overpressure, talking more than 15 psi, and that's 15 or 25. Anyway, it's enough. It's going to be enough pressure that it's essentially going to demolish buildings. Okay. You have residual overpressure after that, where it's not enough to knock a building down, but it's enough to do structural damage. Probably knock out windows, and that's going to be much for. That's going to be a much bigger area that you're going to end up dealing with. The EMP is going to be pretty widespread. That will affect a lot of fine circuitry, possibly larger electrical lines, but maybe not so much those larger electrical lines. They can actually handle a lot of voltage without being damaged. It's mostly really the fine circuits that can't handle a lot of voltage, or a high amount of current, rather, I should say. They can't handle a high current without burning out. If they're just going to be overpowered. Okay, so think, trying to pump. Think about a fire engine's pump. It can put out 1,000 gallons of water a minute. All right, pretty easily. Most of them can put out way more than that. But we'll just say 1,000 gallons of water a minute. Imagine trying to pump that. And most fire hoses are like, your fire attack lines are 2.5 inches wide. That's a good fire attack line for, say, an industrial fire. Residential fire, you're talking like 1 3/4 line. Still a big line. Now imagine trying to force that exact amount of water through a garden hose. That's the idea behind these this EMP burning out fine electrical circuits, especially ones that aren't shielded. So then you also have the initial radiation coming from that blast, which the initial one is a gamma ray burst. It's going to make it through just about everything. It's very short-lived, so that is good. When it comes to any kind of radiation, the biggest things to mitigate are time, distance, and shielding. Okay, so since it's very short-lived, the distance is gonna matter somewhat, but it's so short-lived, your body's just not gonna really absorb a lot unless you're right in the area where you're probably, your biggest threat's gonna end up being either that heat or that overpressure knocking the building down around you that you're sitting in. You can mitigate with shielding quite a bit at your house if you want to, and we'll get into that in a minute. But then there's the radioactive fallout. So the actual materials that are used will become, essentially, they're not going to disappear, right? Laws of physics. Matter can't be, or matter energy, right? It's not going to, it's either, there has to be destroyed. It can't be destroyed or created. There's a set amount, so the matter that's not turned into energy in the blast is going to go somewhere, right? It's not just going to disappear. It's going to become fine particles, go into the atmosphere, and then spread out. And that's really where we're going to get a lot of the follow-on casualties from. When people talk about a nuclear wasteland, that's really what they're talking about. Whether or not there's a nuclear winter, that's going to come down to, are we doing these air bursts or are we doing ground bursts? Ground bursts is going to throw up a lot of particulates in the atmosphere. Air bursts, it's mostly going to be radioactive particulates that are thrown up in the atmosphere. There's going to be other stuff too, but it's not going to be that much. To my understanding, it's not really going to blanket the Earth and blot out the sun. However, it is going, regardless, it's going to drop global temperatures. How far just depends on the severity of how many strikes there are. And that's all throughout the world. That fallout, it'll travel with prevailing winds. And so when you get into that fallout, you're talking mostly alpha and beta radiation. Very weak radiation. Alpha radiation is a larger particle size, which means it doesn't penetrate as well. So when it comes to radiation penetrating through things, it has to have a gap to make it through in order to get to wherever it's going to affect anything. So, for example, say gamma radiation, If you have water to shield you from it, you will be much better protected than you will in an underground concrete bunker. If, as I recall, it's something like 8 to 18 inches of water, somewhere around there, will give you as much radiation protection from gamma ray bursts as 6 feet of concrete, just because of how densely packed the molecules of water are when they're sitting static. So they will just, the radiation particles just can't make it through. So when it comes to alpha and beta particles, those are even bigger than gamma. They don't make it through stuff very easily. So alpha particles, they probably won't make it through your outer skin. Beta particles, they can be stopped by something as thin as a piece of paper. The thing to think about, though, is inhaling that dust, because they will coat. So while your body will be okay if it stays outside, if it comes in and attacks the soft tissues, that's where you start having problems. So particulate respirators are going to be big. If you're doing preparations for this stuff, you're going to want to have ways of sealing off your house from the outside environment to contain the atmosphere inside and ensure the atmosphere outside does not come in. And if you're going to have to venture out, which you probably are, nobody can stay in their house forever, you're going to want to have ways of deconning yourself. This is a video I thought about making for quite a while, but I just didn't have time to jot down notes. I just had time to make it right now, and I wanted to put something out because I haven't had anything out for a while. So I don't remember exactly off the top of my head. Maybe somebody can give me a comment about how long that stuff's going to stay in the air and how quickly the threat of it drops off as time goes on. I might be remembering something entirely off the wall with it, but I believe it's something like an inverse square relationship, where essentially, I know it's a half-life relationship at least. So after 10 hours, you have half the amount of radiation as you did at 5. At 20, you have half the amount of radiation as at 10. At 40 hours, you have half the amount of radiation at 20. So it's going to drop off pretty quickly. It's never going to really quite go away. And other things are going to affect how much of that stays in the air. You know, your prevailing weather conditions. If you have storms moving through when these things hit, it's going to keep churning things up. Rain will actually bring it down out of the air, and it will attach to those water particles and go into the ground. However, it's still in the ground, and it will be in anything that grows in the ground. Well, it will likely be in anything that grows in the ground. In most nuclear incidents that have occurred, what they will do is they will actually dig up the ground down to a couple of inches and then just repackage that and haul it off somewhere. That way they can collect all that fallout and contain it into one spot. Big thing going around is potassium iodide. So when it comes to radiation and how it affects people, if you have to send someone out, the general consensus right now is to send out the oldest individual you have. Older, bigger, better. As people get older, their thyroids tend to become more resilient to radiation, so they will have less issues. What potassium iodide does is it helps give you an iodine necessary in your thyroid for normal endocrine processes, to replace radioactive iodine that it will process in through drinking water or contaminants in the atmosphere. Hold on, let me turn the light on here. There, I can see me a little bit better. And I might be quoting that just a little bit wrong. Again, I don't have notes with me right now. As always, anybody who has good information on this that can correct fine points, please do so in the comments. I am not here to show you how much I know. I am here to try to generate discussion and make sure people have as much good information as possible and as many places to find it as they can. So the nuclear conflict idea there, yeah, it's survivable. There's going to be large swaths of area that are only affected by very minimal amounts of radioactive fallout. Russia's nuclear doctrine, at least the Soviet Union's nuclear doctrine, to my understanding, again, was that they actually would prepare for strikes, watch for strikes, prepare for strikes, and they had shelters built public infrastructure, shelters built on massive scales, and would evacuate cities, shelter in place where they could not evacuate cities, and essentially try to protect a population that could still produce food. Producing food was huge because you're not going to keep going if you can't eat. And the U.S. never really had that. There are still some schools that are probably okay as fallout shelters. But the number of fallout shelters in place today in the U.S. is probably very small. It's other than outside of the military. The U.S. policy, as best as I know, is to protect the military and the government for retaliatory strikes, because we do not have a first strike doctrine. We do not plan on using nuclear strikes first. But there is no mass public program to protect civilians either. It is up to us to protect ourselves. That's kind of the price of freedom. We got to take care of ourselves. And hence why I try to put out good information for folks, so hopefully they can learn better how to protect themselves. So, understanding all of that, what can you do to prepare? Like we talked a little bit, we hit a few points here and there. Little things you can do, keeping the atmosphere outside, make sure you have particulate air filters. The biggest thing, FEMA had a map released that I looked at. I think it's pretty probably close. This is my understanding as a previously forward deployed intelligence section NCOIC for the Army. Never formally trained. However, I did learn to use my gut instinct a little bit, read logic, analyze information. I had learned on the job very well how to do that. And it passes the smell test. Generally speaking, I think it's probably something worth finding. You can find it on Reddit. If you just Google FEMA nuclear strike map, I'm pretty sure it'll pop up. It'll show you certain targets. Now, you're not going to see exact locations. You're not going to see like GPS locations, like down to the latitude, longitude, minute, second, none of that. Definitely not going to get like 10-digit grid coordinates. But you can take a look at where these strikes are at, and if they're somewhere near you, you can apply your own logic. What are they going to want to hit? They're going to want to hit military infrastructure. They're going to want to hit commercial infrastructure. They're really going to want to make sure that they degrade our ability to retaliate again after our first retaliation, and our ability to invade and take over. So they're going to be wanting to hit commercial supply routes. That's going to be huge. So like where I live, I'm on the Mississippi River. We also have a major, I gotta roll my window. There's a guy walking by talking. So the Mississippi River itself is a major commercial supply route. And there's also rail lines coming through here, airports, we're talking interstates, cross-country interstates come through. So I can take a look at these blast emulators, see about how big these blasts are going to be, kind of estimate what they might want to hit us with. I'm guessing in our area, they're probably going to want to hit us with something about 800 kilotons to maybe a megaton, because they can take out quite a bit with that as far as the first strike goes. And I can kind of surmise, based on how much blast damage that's going to do, about where they're going to hit at. I highly suspect there's going to be an intervening crest in between my house and wherever this blast is at. I will probably be about 10 miles away from it. That would be for an initial blast. I will not be downwind. Likely will not be downwind. However, I will probably be in between that big overpressure and residual overpressure area. So I'll probably see some structural. I'm guessing I would end up seeing something like a tornado. Like an F5 tornado is probably going to be similar to what I end up dealing with at my house. If I want to protect myself from the gamma radiation, if I was possibly a little bit closer and I would wanted to protect myself for it, I would take my water stores and move them over to that wall, to the wall in between me and where it was coming from. I keep plastic sheeting around my house and duct tape so I can tape over openings. Put the duct tape on the windows, but tape over the window opening too. just cover everything you possibly can and just get ready to kind of hunker down for a day or two. I would say at least 48 hours. Be ready to sit in your house for 48 hours and have at least an N95 mask, which I think everyone in the U.S. is overly familiar with at this point in their lives. But an N95 for sure. These particulates are going to be very, very fine. Your COVID mask is not going to be sufficient, not at all. And learn how to fit an N95 mask appropriately. A lot of people do not know how to do that correctly. You really should be getting fit tested for it, but I doubt most people have access to a fit testing machine for when it comes to masks. So make sure at least it is in contact with your face when you breathe, completely pinned down around the nose. If you're using one of those disposable masks, I would suggest go out and get a painting N95. It will seal to your face very well. My face is a medium. I am 6'1", just slightly under 300 pounds right now. But a medium-sized mask, it fits my face and fits my nose and mouth when it comes to half-face respirators. Goggles as well. You want eye protection. You don't want it hitting those soft tissues in your eyes if you can avoid it. You also have tear ducts that it can come down through into your nose. So the more you keep off you, the better. The fact that this is happening, if it happens, we are all at a very highly increased risk for cancer. It's just the name of the game. But we can still buy a lot of good years before that happens, right? And it's not just about us. It's about our children, our children's children, and trying to build them a good life. So good preps. Again, to add on to that, if you have the room for it, which I do not right now. I really wish I did, and I'm working towards getting that, but greenhouse. Enclosed aquaponic systems that's outside of the normal atmosphere. It may be in a greenhouse. That would be ideal, especially if you're far enough away from anywhere that you don't have to worry about that blast knocking your greenhouse out. That would be huge because you're going to need food. Like, you can store as much food as you want, but that food's going to run out. It's finite. Unless you can produce more food, you're going to have issues. And that radiation, that fallout, it's going to affect the wildlife too. So you're going to get residual fallout by eating the wild animals that are around any areas that are affected. I'm not super concerned right now that we're going to find ourselves in a nuclear conflict, because that's insane. There are no winners. There's no winners. It's only a matter of how bad are we going to lose. I also believe that if we find ourselves in a nuclear conflict, it is fully survivable for quite a few people, for a huge number of people. The thing in the U.S. is that you have to be ready to take care of yourself, and as much as you can, build those family bonds, build that tribe, build that community with the people around you, because you're going to need each other to help feed each other, to help produce these things, to help get going on food production for the next year, to understand your crops aren't going to produce as much as they did if they're growing out in the open, especially if global temperatures are dropping. Warm temperatures equal good crops. That's how it generally is. It can also equal unpredictable weather, as we're seeing, but crops will grow better. So take all this with a grain of salt. This is from my understanding, what I've read. Please, if you know more than I do, send some comments down there. Absolutely. If you have some good videos that explain this even better than I do, absolutely share them. Again, this is not about me showing you how great I am and how much I know. This is me trying to make sure as many people can pull through these hard times that we occasionally find ourselves in as possible. And with any luck, hopefully somewhat comfortably. So I've done a lot of reading on this stuff. I'm hoping to share this stuff with folks who maybe haven't had a chance to do that yet, and give them a somewhat more concise source so that they don't have to go look around as much as I did. So as always, stay prepared, train, work hard, love your family, and thank you again for watching.